Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. And we are back with the next episode of My Thoughts Season 2, where we'll be reviewing every single Phase 4 MCU movie. So, again, just to recap for anybody who's new, we did Season 1, which was the Disney Plus shows. And this time we are going through and looking at all of the Phase 4 movies, and we'll be ranking them on a scale of 1 to 7. The first movie, so number 1 being the absolute best of Phase 4, and 7 being the absolute worst of Phase 4. Now, as I said last time, I'd like to, preface this by saying that in my opinion, there are 3 different categories of Phase 4 movies. You have the top 3 best films, in my opinion, which will be 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to go ahead and preface this by saying that ranking the 3 best films, in my opinion, was incredibly difficult. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where the top 3 films would land and where they would rank. So, just as a heads up, I really don't think there is a exact correct order where you can list the top 3 films. So, I'd be very interested to see where all of you fall on this. And then after that, we have 4 and 5, which are not great films. They're mediocre. They're not terrible. You can watch them, but again, they're nothing special. And then 6 and 7 are not great films, and I would not recommend them. In fact, as you guys know, if you watched my last episode, we had our first movie ranked, which was the Black Widow film, and it took the number 6 spot. And that's sort of the thing that I will say just as a general note about all of the movies within Phase 4 is that they're really hit or miss, and more of them are miss than hits, which is kind of disappointing, but, it is what it is, and I thought that, I just put that out there for everybody to sort of hear my general thoughts on Phase 4, because I think that, this is probably not a hot take here. Phase 4 is the weakest out of all of the phases so far, in my opinion. Then again, we have to keep in mind this was a transitional phase. We're moving away from the Infinity Saga all the way up until we eventually reach the Multiverse Saga. So I'm sure that once we reach Phase 5, the new phase will sort of come into its own more. And, we'll see what happens. I have a lot of high expectations for the next few movies coming out, like Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and the Marvels. I think all of those movies I have very high expectations for. Didn't have as high expectations for these movies, per se, but we'll get into that. And speaking of a movie that I really didn't have that high of expectations for, the movie we're talking about today, which is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say it. If I butcher any of the pronunciations of the characters in this film, I'd like to apologize in advance. And I know right off the bat, most people call him Shang-Chi. I think moving on, I'm going to call him Shang-Chi. But it is pronounced, or if you read it how it is supposed to be pronounced, I believe it's Shang-Chi. But I'm going to say Shang-Chi moving forward. So, Shang-Chi was the first solo hero origin story, and arguably the only solo hero film from this phase. And now what I mean by that is all of the other movies were continuations of previous characters outside of the movie which we will be talking about next week, but as you will hear when we get to that review, it's a mess. In and of itself, and trying to determine who exactly is the main character is going to be more of a difficult task than some might think. But this is the only movie where we really got a new character and got an Iron Man, Captain America, Thor type story to sort of build up to their inclusion in the overall bigger picture and grand scheme of things. Not to mention, Shang-Chi is the first main Asian superhero that we've gotten in the MCU, and this was the first movie where a Asian superhero was the main character. And that was really culturally significant for a lot of people, and I think that it is worth mentioning because again, I think that there are a lot of people who probably saw themselves in Shang-Chi through this movie because it was the first time they probably saw someone who looked like them on the big screen being the center of attention, and I think that's really cool. So as we did last time, I'm going to start off by going through the main characters. I'm going to talk about what my favorite scenes were, what my worst scenes were. And again, these are all subjective, but again, I just want to share that with you all, and I want to invite you all to, again, leave your comments down below. Tell me if you agree, disagree. If the scene that I disliked you loved, please comment about it. If the scene that I, absolutely loved you hated, comment on it. And, I'm interested to have some conversation with you all in the comments. So up first, we got to start by talking about Shang-Chi, because again, he is the main character. In my opinion, however this movie was going to go, it was going to go based on how the performance of Simu Liu went. Now, he was, in my opinion, a relatively new actor. I know that there's probably some people out there who knew him way before I did through this movie, but this is going to be a lot of audiences' first real experience getting to see him on the big screen and getting to experience, what he was going to be like as a character. And as I said, I have a feeling that Shang-Chi is going to be a mainstay moving forward. And so, this really had some high stakes attached to it, unlike the previous movie we talked about, Black Widow, where again, we already sort of knew what was going to happen to Black Widow. This movie, we're going to set up a character that's going to likely be around for the rest of this saga and most likely the next saga as well. And overall, I think that Shang-Chi was a great character. He had a fantastic origin story, and I think the reason why his origin story was so great is that we really got to see the pain that this character went through. And I think that's something that we haven't really seen in a lot of the other hero stories that we've gotten. I think the last time I'd say it was done fairly effectively was, of course, Iron Man. And I think that somewhat Moon Knight showed eventually effectively how much, Mark Spector and everything that he had to go through, how that impacted him. But we really see what exactly Shang-Chi had to deal with, and specifically the pain of his past. Being there when his mother got murdered, and having to watch as his father subsequently went and killed the men who killed his mother, and sort of dealing with the pain that brought along. Him having to figure out if he would actually repay the blood debt that was created when they killed his mother, and ultimately deciding not to and running away from home. I think that is it's something that really showed us who he is as a person without having to show us a lot about who he is as a person, because we can already tell he made the right decision. He made the decision to avoid being an assassin and to live a relatively normal life. And because of that, we can sort of relate to the fact of, oh yeah, he is heroic, he's a good guy, and we didn't need to see much else. And as I said before, he sort of set up his character arc to be one where we're going to see a new side of characters that I don't think we've ever really seen before, which is people who are great at physical hand-to-hand combat. Of course, Captain America was good at it, Black Panther is good at it, but Shang-Chi's entire character is based off of the fact that he is good at martial arts. And I think that is going to be a very interesting thing to see, specifically with fight choreography and stuff like that moving forward. So, again, I just thought that Shang-Chi might have had the best character introduction out of anybody in Phase 4. That'll be debatable, of course, but just wanted to say that, again, Simu Liu gave a fantastic performance. Katie Chen is the next character I want to talk about, and she was the non-romantic love interest for Shang-Chi, but more importantly, she was sort of there as the comedic relief. And I will say that, as I mentioned last time, in Black Widow, you're going to see that there are, in a lot of these films, very specifically comedic relief characters placed in, I think to a degree that we really haven't seen before in the MCU consistently throughout the movies and series and things of that nature. And I think Katie Chen actually stands out as arguably the best, comedic relief character out of all of Phase 4. Now, there are some jokes that don't really hit. I'm not going to lie to you guys and say, she's a perfect comedic relief character, but more times than not, her jokes work and they make you laugh. Not to mention how they set up her relationship with Shang-Chi is fantastic. I don't really think any of us really know where they stand with each other. I think a lot of people presume they're friends, but who knows what'll happen, and that in and of itself makes her an important character moving forward, as we're going to want to see what happens between the two of them. So again, arguably the best use of a comedic side character in all of Phase 4. Now we have Zhu Dailing as the next character I'm going to talk about, Shang-Chi's sister. And she sort of serves as a typical, powerful side character that the main hero gets to deal with, but her role is taken to a new level as we get to really see the pain of her past. We get to see why she's mad at Shang-Chi, and it's because he left her as a kid. She waited around, waited for him to return to her, and she never did. And I think that compared to a lot of the other frustration and anger we sort of get from characters at times, again, this is much more believable and a lot more relatable, I think, to a lot of people. And unlike a lot of the other sort of side characters that have been set up, I think this is one of the bigger issues with Phase 4 is that we've gotten a lot of side characters in all these films, and there's a lot of question of where are they going to show up again. And I'll go back to Black Widow for this. We knew sort of based on the post-credit scene that Yelena was going to show up once again, and she was going to eventually show up in the Hawkeye series. But until they made the announcement about Red Guardian's inclusion in Thunderbolts and Taskmaster's inclusion in Thunderbolts, we had no idea where they were going to go. And that's sort of, again, I think we're introducing a lot of new characters and we really have no idea where they're going to show up again or what role they're going to play. And, I think that in sharp contrast to this, how they set up Zhu's eventual return being the new leader of the Ten Rings, I think that's fantastic. We don't know where she's going to show up again, but we know what she's doing. We know that she's setting up the new ranks of the Ten Rings and she's taking over as leader. And, that sort of, for the time being, gives us a, chance to sort of sit back and say, okay, we know what's going on with her. Let's figure out what's going on with everybody else. So I really appreciated them doing that. And I'll be interested to see where she shows up again. Now let's talk about the villain of the movie, Zhu Wenwu, the Mandarin who makes fun of that name, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. But I'd actually compare him the most to Thanos, actually, because he and Thanos both were individuals who predicated most of what they did on their family and wanting to do something, in Thanos' case, for the greater good, in Zhu's case, for himself. So, with that being said, I actually think that his motivation made a lot of sense. He wanted to see his wife, and because of that, I think that you sort of sympathize with him. You're not saying he's a good guy or that what he's doing is great, but you recognize where he's coming from. And, I think at the very start of the film, you see him, just decimating these different locations and, just showing off his power and the power of the Ten Rings. But as time goes on, you sort of recognize that he just wants love and he misses his wife. And the fact that he believes his wife is still alive, again, it gives you some sort of sympathy. You hate the fact that he firmly believes this, and you know that his ultimate decision to try to free his wife is going to lead to some greater danger that Shang-Chi and his friends are going to have to deal with. But you feel for him. And I think something else that was not really done with Thanos that was done with this character is that Thanos used his kids as sort of pawns to get the others to do his bidding. In this movie, Zhu really wants both of his children to do nothing more than to join him. He's not about ruling with an iron fist. He wants them to be a part of his goal and his plan and to save their mother. And, there's something that is sort of nice about that. Again, you have to sympathize with him. He's not this, just killer, doesn't care about anybody. He wants his kids to be with him, and I think that that makes him a great villain. And, again, I think that you sympathize with him a lot more than some other villains we've gotten in Phase 4. So with that being said, let's talk about the best scenes. There are two. I couldn't pick between them. The first is probably the most obvious, the bus fight scene. That might be one of the best choreographed fights in all of Phase 4. Shang-Chi versus, I want to say Razor Fist. I know that's not his name, but, him versus the Ten Ring soldiers, that was perfect. You really get to see how good of a martial artist Shang-Chi is, and I actually think, again, the individual recording to Facebook Live, the fight, he gets the name Busboy, that was funny. Again, it was one of the comedic moments that really hit in this phase. And I'll also say the other great fight was the final fight scene where Shang-Chi finally fought Zhu Wenwu, and we get to see Shang-Chi take the 10 rings. And, it's sort of this thing where, Shang-Chi is not, just being brutal with his force. He's being smart. And I think that's something that's going to serve him as a character well, is we know he's not just a, throw fists everywhere fighter. He's very calculated. He's very smart. He's very witty. He makes good decisions. And I think it'll be very interesting to see, how that's expanded upon moving forward. Now, you're going to hear me gripe about this once again, but in my opinion, the worst scene was the bar fight scene, mainly because it started off with a pointless cameo of Abomination and Wong. Now, as I said in She-Hulk, I think that they made that scene a little bit more pertinent, but they did not do a good job of really explaining why Wong was there. And because of that, I still have to say that, it could have been done without having to put it into this movie. But, again, maybe there'll be a bigger plot point down the line where we will see why he was included. If they do, I will retract that statement. But that was sort of pointless, and, Shang-Chi fighting his sister, it was decent. I don't think it was the best fight out of all of them. But, again, I really think that the Abomination versus Wong fight takes this down for me just a tad bit. So with that being said, it is time to place Shang-Chi among the other categories and other films within Phase 4. And I have to say that, in my opinion, Shang-Chi is the third best film out of the 7. Now, I want to go ahead and preface this ranking by saying, as I said, I had a very difficult time ranking the top 3. And I'll be honest with you, Shang-Chi, for a while, it was my number 1. Then for a while, it was my number 2. And I really struggled between putting it at number 2 or number 3. I ended with number 3 after watching the other 2 films, once again, that are going to be ranked higher than it. But I will say this, if it is your favorite movie, I think that's perfectly acceptable. If it's your second favorite movie, I think it's perfectly acceptable. And I think that's sort of the beauty of these top 3 films that we're going to talk about, is I think all of them are sort of interchangeable, and you can have differences, but they're all great films in and of themselves, so you can enjoy it, and I don't think anybody would blame you if you said Shang-Chi was your favorite Phase 4 movie. But for me, I think it ranks as the third best. I'm excited to see what they do with the character. And overall, a great movie that you can watch again and have a great time. So with that being said, again, please leave your comments down below. Tell me what you thought about the movie, if it's your favorite, where you would rank it out of the 7 films from Phase 4. And I hope you all will continue to like, subscribe, share these videos with a friend, and keep on the lookout for next week when we talk about Marvel's The Eternals. I will see you all then. Take care.